Hi everyone, and welcome to another one of the Flying Changes Mindset recordings here. Today we are live with lovely Erin Orford. Hi Erin.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Now Erin, you are a bit of a para queen, aren't you? So you are Team GB Para Rider, aiming for the top, and lots going on with that right now. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Erin, and what it is that brought you to be where you are today, or where did it all start really?
So it basically all started through the riding for the Disabled Association. So my disability is that I'm a bilateral through knee amputee, which means I had both my legs amputated through the knee aged 1. I'm also missing the radius in both my arms. So I have slightly shorter lower arms and 4 fingers on each hand. So kind of between my elbows and my knees, I'm relatively normal. And it's just the kind of extensions of the limbs that are affected or aren't there. So kind of that's all I've ever known. I've grown up like in that way and learnt to do things in that way, which I imagine is the easy way to do things. So I think I was one or two. I first was put on a horse for the RDA, and kind of did that for a long time. And at the time I didn't know kind of para sport wasn't that big, wasn't that well promoted. More than anything, it was about the promotion or lack of it. So I didn't know it existed really. And I think it was kind of 2004, just before 2004, we moved house as a family, and actually moved around the corner from Claire Strange's family, who was captain of the wheelchair basketball team. And she was very heavily involved in sport development and getting young people into sport, and para sport. So we met her, and I had that summer. I had a lot of issues with my prosthetic legs, and I don't actually have. I've never owned a wheelchair, so my legs are my way of getting around. So I spent quite a lot of that summer either going to the hospital to get fittings done, or sat at home. So my mum took me to Athens Paralympics, to watch Claire and all the other sports, and kind of that was where that was how it started. And I saw the British team win gold, and lots of other success there, and I kind of that's what pushed me to want to pursue that, and kind of really open my eyes as to what opportunities are out there. So that was kind of the turning point, I think, for me.
Cool. Okay, and we're going to come back more to that part of your story later. So you obviously put on a pony very young. Where did that come from then? Is it something in your family, or is it, well, it must have been something in your family to want to be on a pony at that young? Like, you don't really get much say at that kind of age, do you?
No, I mean, I'm not sure you can call it riding at age 2. You literally are just led around. No, my mum did used to ride. She had quite a bad accident when she was 14 and broke her pelvis, so that was the end of her riding. So other than that, I don't really come from a horsey family. My dad comes from Liverpool, and hadn't had anything to do with horses. Didn't really have pets in his youth, I don't think. But it was suggested as a form of therapy to help with my balance, and as part of that, kind of learning about your body and your balance and your core stability and that side of it. It was suggested to take me to RDA, I think through chance, through one of the mother groups sort of thing. So that was kind of what pushed that move. I I think they probably regret it a little bit because it's a very can be a very expensive move. But yeah, so kind of I don't grow up, you know, I never grew up with horses at home. You know, I never dreamed of that I would ever have my own horse. That wasn't the norm.
Yeah. And so obviously it stuck. It's a bit like my parents bought me my first horse riding lesson at 7 years old because I pestered them, and they thought they would get it out of my system. And I'm now heading towards 37, and I think they've realised it's not a phase anymore.
It's not a phase.
So tell me about what it was that then kept you in that. So obviously it started as a therapeutic thing, but very much clearly developed into something much more. What was it that drove that for you?
Yeah, I think I've always been very competitive. Kind of, I used to, you know, at the start, I was kind of not a regular. I didn't have a regular slot. I used to sit by the phone back when we didn't have mobiles and there was a cord. And kind of every week I would wait to see if I got a call and to see if I could ride that week. So kind of it developed from there, and I always liked the challenge of riding. I always wanted to do more. I liked the relationship you have with your horse. I think kind of for me, I got to a point where I wanted to do more and I wanted to compete more and I wanted to progress. And before I knew about you know, para sport and back in those days, there were much fewer transitional kind of opportunities between RDA and sport riding. So we didn't have the bronze, silver, gold that we have now. I think the perception was very different. Kind of everyone was very safety conscious and you know, not quite so aware about the sort of horses that para riders could ride and that side of it. So I think as I got towards my teenage years and you know, my friends were doing different things and socializing more, and you know, at age 13, 14 I was looking for a bit more of a challenge and to try different things. And I did actually take a bit of a break from RDA. We moved house before we moved when we moved to where we are now, or where the family home is now. It meant that the journey was a lot further to go for these sessions. It was over an hour or something. So I was starting to get a bit lacking where I could go with it and the sports side of it. So I did actually take a bit of a break at about 4 or 5 months. And then I met Claire, and Claire introduced me to a sport centre that was very good at the transitional phase. And she kind of said, what sport do you want to do? And why don't you try wheelchair basketball? But I'm quite short and I've got short arms. So I think we very quickly agreed that wasn't where my forte was. And she kind of said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to ride. And that's how I moved on to the transition to sport riding. And I was very lucky. So I was at South Bucks RDA, and they've got
a lot to answer for, haven't they? South Bucks.
They had a lot of previous riders like Sophie, who was going out to Athens, and Natasha went there at one point. I think most people have been there at some point. So that was kind of the point where it became a little bit more competitive, and I started to see what other people were doing. And yeah, I kind of, they had different horsepower, they had a different setup, and it really opened my eyes as to the sports side. And kind of after Athens, I did a talent spotting competition, which was kind of my first big national thing, and I won that, and on like a borrowed horse that I was riding at the time, and kind of that was the driver, and got me noticed a little bit, I think.
So you've talked then about the sort of the difference between RDA and para and calling it sport. And I think a lot of people intertwine the two, but actually they're very different, aren't they? So tell us a little bit about, in your experience, the difference that's been between the RDA and para, and how actually they are linking a little bit better nowadays, aren't they? They're, like you say, South Bucks is very progressive in that, and I know other centres that are really good at looking at it more of the sport now.
Yeah, I mean, the first one I went to was in Chesham, and we literally had like a 20 by 40. The ponies were tied up kind of on a yard that was really, really lovely, but they didn't have, they didn't have the sport horses. It was quite a small centre, and they didn't have, well, no one had kind of the owners that now are interested in providing horses for RDA and sport horses. So RDA has always been a bit more therapy based, which is their main goal, and still is. But they are, they now have the RDA regionals, RDA nationals. You can compete to a high level within RDA, and there's a lot of opportunities to do that. But there is a bit of a crossover towards the sport riding. So, not everyone who rides is aiming for the Paralympics. It's, not everyone who rides able-bodied is aiming for the Olympics. So it's having those opportunities for people that want to ride for leisure, want to ride for therapy, can do that. And those that want to ride sport-wise and compete, whether that's for fun, regional level, national level, whatever they want to do, right up to Paralympic sport. So there's just so many more opportunities, and a lot of riders have come through RDA. If they've grown up with a disability, or if they've had an injury and had to rehabilitate, a lot of people do come through that route. And it's a really good way for people to do that, and it's a really good support system that they have through the RDA. So they are very different in terms of their goals, but there is a connection, and there is quite a nice link for some people.
And I think there's a bit of a common misconception out there, isn't there, that if you are not able-bodied, that actually everyone's aiming for the Paralympics. There seems to be that misconception, but obviously you are and have and are very much aiming for that. Before we get on to more about your, your Team GB journey, I want to know what's one word that you would use to describe you and why it is that you do what you do. What would be one word you'd use to kind of really sum that up, and why?
Oh God. I don't know. A lot of people have called me stubborn. I think, equestrian sport is not straightforward. Whatever level you're doing it at, you can have very good days, and very quickly you can feel like you can't do it, or the horse goes lame, or barriers are thrown in your way, and that's for everyone. That's life, isn't it? But especially with horses, you've got two living beings, so rider injury and horse injury is a real thing. So I think that's probably been the thing that has kept me going with it. But also kind of I love riding, I love training, I love pushing myself, even kind of with gym work and things like that. I love kind of that feeling that you have worked really hard, you've pushed yourself to the limit in some way or another, like that feeling of testing yourself and kind of the thing I love about equestrian sport is that it isn't one kind of physical thing that makes you better than anyone else. Kind of, it's not about being the tallest or the strongest or the fastest. Yes, you can kind of optimize what you have, but there's, you know, you can't look at a rider and be like, off horse, you're going to be a bad rider or you're not going to make it, because there's no one physical type, you know, for men and women to compete equally, for paras and able-bodied to compete equally. You know, it's not about strength, it's about skill and training and kind of the bond that you have with your horse, and that's what kind of really appeals to me with this sport.
And so you call it stubbornness, I call that resilience. So okay, so let's get on to resilience, stubbornness, whichever you want to call it, single-mindedness, all of those things. Yeah. What then has been your greatest challenge on your journey so far that you've had to overcome, and how did you overcome it?
Oh, tons. I couldn't probably pin down one. I had a particularly challenging, shall we say, year in 2014. It was the build up to the World Equestrian Games, and it must have been February, I broke my back in 4 or 5 places, I don't remember, and my ribs, 4 or 5 ribs. So I had quite a strong fall, and I'd had a lot of falls kind of over the years. You do, don't you? But none where I couldn't kind of get back up and get back on, basically. And that was my first big one. I was off for 6 weeks. I was really, really lucky. I was able to go to a rehab unit at Bisham, I think a week after I'd fallen off. And I remember being in hospital and kind of, they had said I was desperate to go home because I'm not a fan of being in hospital and not being able to do anything. And they'd said you can go home once you can go to the toilet on your own. So I remember a couple of days after my fall, I managed to walk or hobble, whatever it was, to the bathroom, and I got a round of applause from the ward because we were all kind of aiming for the same goal. We all had our kind of small journeys, and 6 weeks after that, I was able to get back on and ride. My top horse at the time, had just also had 6 weeks off, partly because of an injury and partly because I'd been off. So I think the second time I was back on him, he spooked at some birds, bolted, realised that he shouldn't be bolting and stopped dead. So I went straight over his head, back in hospital. Luckily I hadn't done anything too bad, but quite bad bruising, and a bit of pride probably. So I then found out that he was out for the season with injury. So I had to very quickly find a horse that I could compete so that I could kind of retain my spot on the squad and be in contention. And I very quickly found a horse, and had her on loan for a short period. And at the end of the year, kind of, I was trying other horses because this one needed to go back. And I had a horse on trial and fell off the horse again, and ended up back in hospital. So I think I'd been in hospital about 4 times that year. And at the end of the year, I tried Dior or Pims. That was my top horse. And I think I had had so many bad experiences. I was so on edge. She's DiMaggio chestnut mare, so she could be quite a hot mare as well. And she gave me a feeling of buzziness. And I think it took me about 6 months before I was happy riding her. I kind of accepted the ride because she was very talented, and I really needed a horse. So I kind of pushed my fears or doubts to one side, and just stuck it out. And literally, I gave myself exercises to concentrate on with her in the ridden sessions, so that I wasn't thinking about how I felt or being worried. And yeah, I literally was like, I just need to get through a 20-meter circle in each rein, a couple of 10-meter circles, leg yields, so I gave myself structure so that I had something to follow. And kind of my biggest concern, when I'd broken my back, was whether I'd be able to ride again. So to not ride because I was worried, I'd be having the same outcome that I was so worried about from my injury. So that was kind of how I put that into perspective a little bit.
Okay, so you fell off 3 times. You're in hospital 3 times. You had every reason to say, that's enough. Jacking it in. I haven't even got the horse right now. Clearly, one of your strategies to overcome challenges is to set yourself little goals and just keep working to achieve them. That's obviously something you said a few times that you do.
Yeah.
But if you get to the bigger picture element, what was it that kept you going then? What was it that meant you didn't just go, oh, do you know what? I've got every single reason right now not to be doing this. Let's just leave it. Like it's not going to happen.
I just felt like I still had a lot I wanted to achieve, really. And even I remember when I was in hospital, and most people would have ruled out, the championship at the end of the year. And I hadn't been to a championship at that point, so it wasn't something that I expected to do, or that was anyone else expected me to do. But kind of just, I remember I was supposed to be going to Belgium kind of 5 or 6 weeks later. So that was ruled out. And I just very quickly, once I had had a conversation with my manager, I had put a plan in place, I'd rerouted myself. I kind of felt that was, that I was fine with it. I was fine with sitting and resting for a week, because I knew that was my plan. And week 2, I would be rehabbing, and week 3, I would be stronger, and kind of having kind of mini goals and a strategy. Kind of my comfort blanket was a little bit knowing that I had a plan, and that it still led to the overall goal. And even though it was a slightly different route or time frame, that it was, the end goal was still the same. So I never consciously was like, I'm not going to give up, I'm not going to, it just wasn't my, it just didn't even come into my head that almost that was an option. It was just like, right, okay, this has happened, what's next? What do we do next? Kind of how do we overcome this? Like, I don't remember consciously being like, do you want to give up? Do you not want to give up? That wasn't a choice that I made. I was a little bit on autopilot.
So that sounds to me like then you've got a big mission, a big vision, and you're just going to keep going until you get to that. And the question of not doing it just isn't even there. Like that doesn't ever exist, because it's going to happen by hook or by crook. So what is that bigger mission and vision that you've got? What is it that you want to achieve?
I think kind of my goal was always to go to a championship, and to medal. So the Europeans I did that. And kind of anything else is a bonus. And, you know, I always have other goals as well. Like I would love to compete at Paris St George. You know, it's not doing the Europeans has not taken that away, but like I feel like I've ticked that off, and I can now be a little bit more enjoying the process and have kind of separate goals. You know, having goals like going to the Paralympics and winning a medal there's a lot kind of outside of my control, and probably kind of in the past that led me to be a little bit outcome driven. So in hindsight and with learning, kind of I feel like I've done a lot, and in terms of results and being on the team kind of championships, I have done it. Now I would like to do it better, and I still, you know, that still drives me, but now it's a little bit more about having, you know, bringing the horses on, being the best rider I can be, you know, and having extra goals like outside of the team prospects, if that makes sense, so that everything I'm doing is still working towards that, but it's not the be all and end all if it doesn't happen. So it just gives me a bit of a way out sort of thing, so that I can enjoy the process a little bit more. And kind of last year, for example, one of my big goals was to enjoy competing, you know, because and enjoy the small moments, because we are so quick to move on to the next thing. And you know, with the Europeans, it all happens so quickly because of the style of the competition. You know, we did the individual first and had medal day, and suddenly that was all done and it was the team competition. So, you know, it all happens so quickly, and almost you lose sight of what you've achieved already because you're always working towards the next big goal. So last year I really kind of, and I've tried to do it this year, but, you know, we haven't quite had the chance yet because we haven't had shows, but to kind of, you know, I love training and I love competing. I just enjoy both sides of that. But often you are so quick to, you know, you're always doing a qualifier or regionals or nationals or an international, you know, you're building towards the next big thing. And last year I was like, I really just want to try and enjoy being in the moment, and, you know, that the mindfulness aspect of that, and enjoy where I am, what I'm doing at the moment, and whatever happens. If it goes well, brilliant, and if it doesn't, then, you know, still enjoy the process of it a little bit more, I think.
And what do you think the impact has been of changing your focus from outcomes, you know, goals, specifics, championships, qualifications, that kind of thing, to the process, like you say? Because I think a lot of people would just be really thrilled to hear that. A lot of what I talk about all the time is don't focus on the things you can't control. You can have them as a goal if you want to, and you can aim towards them, but they can't be the only goal. You need to focus on the process, and then if the goal happens, bonus, you know, cherry on top of the cake kind of thing. And I think for people to hear that someone who is aiming for Paras, who has been, you know, World Equestrian Games medal winner, Europeans medal winner, that kind of thing, who has achieved those things, to hear you say, actually, I was a bit outcome focused, it wasn't really ideal, and now I've turned it, but I'm still aiming for Paralympic, you know, and potentially, hopefully long listed. So hopefully Tokyo we'll see. You know, what's the impact of flipping that mindset to the process being for you?
you know, I mean, it's an ongoing thing. When you are competitive, you always have to check yourself. You always want that better result, that better outcome. You want to qualify or boost your scores or get that medal, whatever you're going for. So it is an ongoing thing. You know, I do have to check myself sometimes, and one of my weaknesses in the past is that I have my brain gets ahead of me. So I can be riding in a test and make a mistake, and I'm like, oh God, now I'm going to get a bad score. Now I'm going to, you know, the selectors will think I'm inconsistent. I'm going to have to go out next week and do better. I'm going to have to prove myself. Otherwise, I'm not going to be selected for the team. I'm not going to get this result. I'm not going to do this. And suddenly I've planned the next 6 months of my life, and it's all gone wrong, and I need to fix it. And I've, you know, and I'm doing all of that while I'm still riding a test. So it is very ongoing. I do have to kind of keep checking myself, but I think it enables you to, you know, we talk a lot about marginal gains and the small things that will make a difference. And focusing on the process allows you to do that, because it stops you from jumping ahead. It stops you from planning 3 months in advance, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how the horses will feel. We don't know how we'll feel. We don't know what the other 10 people on the squad are doing or what they're coming up with, you know. So it really helps to kind of zone in on what you're doing, the areas that you can improve, and kind of how you can optimize that, rather than looking at it as a generic performance or results or journey. You know, how do I get from A to B? There's like 100 different elements as part of that, and you know, you can do everything right, and you know, someone comes out with a new horse and beats you. You know, that is feasible, and that is a possibility. Or the judges don't like what they see, so mark you down, you know, or your horse picks up an injury. Those are all very feasible things that a lot of them are out of your control. So you know, someone once said about, you only have a certain amount of space in your mind, and a certain amount of mental energy. So if you can focus all of that in areas that you can control, at least you know that everything you've done is under your control, and you have done everything you can in the areas that you have control of, rather than worrying about what someone else is doing. And you know, I don't know if that's true, or if that's kind of how everyone else thinks about it, but it kind of really resonated with me. And you know, when you think about, I think it was Anki's fitness trainer, Dutch rider, who kind of showed us a bit of an exercise about zoning in and focusing on what you're doing. And he demonstrated her core strength with a couple of exercises. And then he gave her the same exercise to do whilst asking her questions that she had to really think about. And she was obviously a lot weaker when she was talking about these questions and answering these questions. And, you know, that's not a physical thing. There's no way she's physically weaker 5 minutes later than she was before, you know, and it really showed you how much your mind can influence your behavior and your strength. And, you know, people say about multitasking,
multi-failing,
you're not doing, yeah, you're doing multiple things badly, or at an average level.
Yeah. And I love that example. I'm going to go look that up now. So that's absolutely perfect way of explaining it. And it's so great to hear from, yourself with your caliber to talk about these things, because, the leisure riders and things, they think, oh, you guys don't have these problems. You talk about this stuff, but you don't really practice it. Or I want to be, I need to focus on the goal. I need to focus on the outcome. Why is this process stuff? Why does Jenny keep bleating on about it all the time? And there's proof. There is proof that actually that's what you've got to do. So moving on from that, I've got a bit deep into the mindset stuff there, which is cool. It's fabulous. No, it's great. People want to hear it. No, it's brilliant. And it's what people want to, listening into this and watching this. It's what they want to hear is that actually this stuff that we're talking about, we're not just doing it for fun. We're not saying this is a nice concept. Why don't we talk about the idea of process versus outcome? But it's actually what you do, and it's what you're taught, and it's what you put into practice, and it makes a difference. So moving on from that, then, I want to know, let's lighten it back up again now too. Along all the amazing things you've done and all the fabulous things you've achieved and where you're at and everything, what's been one of your favourite moments that you've absolutely loved along your way so far?
There's been, some really big ones. So riding, myself and Natasha did a demo at Windsor in 2009. So just before Totalas broke the world record and at the Europeans. So that was really special. But for me, a lot of it is it's the small things. So, when I was training, like one of my past horses, teaching him to piaffe or passage, or doing the flying changes with him, and when the horses give you something new, or they offer more than you ask, it's a really nice moment. And one of my other favorites was kind of in, I think it was 2012. I did the home international, so I was shortlisted for London that year, and kind of one of the backups. So I did instead the home international able-bodied, and kind of going there, and the class was huge. I'm used to having like 10 at an international in our class, and I think there was 35, and kind of going there and winning that, and just putting parasport out there a little bit, and being like, yeah, we do paras, but being able to compete kind of on a level playing field, and showing people what we can do. I love moments like that, and just kind of, there's so many little moments that make up the journey. I did last December my first able-bodied with my younger horse. We did an elementary freestyle, and we did it to Christmas music, because I'd never done a Christmas freestyle before, and my kind of partial goal was to try and qualify him for the regionals. And I said, we didn't have much time in terms of qualification periods, so I knew I had to do 2 to qualify. So I said, right, I'll do 1. If I get the score, I'll do another one, and if I don't, I won't chase it, because I'm just doing it for fun and something different. And so we went and did our Mariah Carey and Rudolph freestyle, and we got 77% and like a PB, and it was just so unexpected, and that was kind of one of the examples of focusing the process. And I had a bit of a mental block about the canter work, because he's quite bouncy, and I don't canter in my freestyles. So with him, I hadn't done so much work in the canter, And I had a bit of a mental block, and there were some horses running around in the field next door. And I was like, right, I'm just gonna try and do the trot work as well as I can, because I can do the trot work. I should be able to do that. That's, you know, that's what I normally do. And then it's the walk. I can do that. And I was like, and if it comes to the canter and it all goes wrong, then it all goes wrong. And kind of I just let it happen. And yeah, we managed to do a clean test. And yeah, that was a really kind of special day. And it's just, yeah, for me, it's a lot of the smaller moments really make it. Kind of probably on the bigger scale, winning my bronze at the Europeans was my breakthrough, you know. But moments like that don't happen very often. There's a championship once a year. So yeah, it's the smaller moments that I kind of really remember just as much, really.
Yeah, and it's lovely, isn't it, when lots of those smaller moments really add up. And that is exactly what I say. That's about focusing on the process, focusing on the little wins, because that keeps you feeling good, doesn't it? Keeps you kind of going.
And you know, that's why we do it, isn't it? We don't do it every day, you know, just for the one-off moment that might happen once a year. You know, you would give up, wouldn't you?
Exactly.
It's the small moments, isn't it?
It is.
When, like, the horse whinnies when you walk on the yard or something stupid like that.
Or like you say, when you're training and actually they give you something and they willingly give you it, and you think, oh, fabulous! This is the partnership that we want. Yeah, this is the whole point.
And they offer it, and you've seen that it clicks, or you get that feeling that even on the ground you might not look like anything, but suddenly it clicks, and you're like, yes, this is why we've had 5 days of feeling like you can't ride, or
yeah. And you have those days again. You know, there's this common misconception out there that you guys that are, you know, top of your game are don't have these difficult moments, or don't have the, you know, it's all easy, and it's just so not the case.
It's never the case. No. And you know, social media is a bit of a downer for that. And I always think, you know, it's like an Instagram filter for real life, isn't it? You know, I think people go one extreme to the other. They put disasters and they put brilliant times, but they're kind of mediocre. The horse was all right today, but nothing special. Kind of
business as usual doesn't sell though, does it? So yeah, absolutely.
Tripped over a rug strap. Doesn't really make the cut a lot of the time, does it?
No, definitely not. And that brings me on to then. So, you know, a lot of people also think that it's a very lonely sport because it's you and the horse. But of course, you've got your incredible team around you. Who in your team is really pivotal? I mean, obviously they're all important, but who have you found along the way has been like super pivotal to your success to be able to help what you do?
Everyone. Yeah, everyone in the team is vital. I think, you know, having people at the end of the phone when you need help, whether that's the farrier because they've pulled a shoe off, or whoever you're training with, or friends. You know, a lot of my friends outside the sport, you know, some are a bit horsey, but quite a few of them aren't. And, you know, sometimes you have that time out where you just take a break from it. And, you know, it's really great. I have a lot of friends and, you know, my team around me within the sport who really understand that. And that's great. But I think, you know, when things aren't quite going to plan, it's nice to be able to have a bit of a breather sometimes. And, you know, I get that with my work as well outside sport, and some of my non-horsey friends, and then, you know, from my horsey team and my you know, like at the moment I've I'm kind of been we've we've been through lockdown and we've not had a huge bubble, shall we say, because we've not been going out and seeing a lot of people. And so I'm based with Sophie Wells, who's also, you know, obviously a team rider. So, you know, having been in that environment where we're both going for the same goals, we both understand the challenges, the pressures, the politics or whatever you know you have to deal with, kind of having people in that environment that can relate to you and know what you're going through and understand it and live it is you know, really important. But also, you know, you've got your family and your friends and your support system. There's such a massive part of the team that you just can't do it without all the people around you. And someone said, you know, make sure that the people you have around you are the people that will kind of clap for you when you're not looking. And I suppose that really resonated, because there are a lot of people that you might come into contact with that you know, might not have your best interests at heart and you know, might work with you on a short-term basis, or might kind of be there when you're having a rant, but you know, might not have your best interests at heart. And you know, I've been really lucky in that I've not been in that situation. You know, the people around me have always been very supportive, but I know people that have struggled with that. So that's always something that's resonated with me, and I think that's applicable at all levels. You know, we have a bit of a thing that we do in that we have a bit of a plan as to what you want people to say to you, even when you're in a warm-up or you're at a competition. And you know, what calms you down, what do you want to know, what do you want to hear, and it could be something silly like my radios are really good at picking up the sound, so that if like Sophie's wearing a radio with the headset on, if anyone else that's nearby is talking, I can hear that. You know, so we really look at kind of make sure you stand when no one's around, or if you hear someone talking, make sure you move, or you know, and it could be something silly like a member of your team has just gone and looked at the scoreboard and seen what someone else has got, or they might just be saying, oh, that horse looked really good, or have you seen so and so? And you know, it's really, really minor things and really, really little details, but just having the right people around you and them knowing what to say as well, you know, and how to support you, because most of the time people want to help. They just don't always know how. And, you know, that's up to you to say, this is what I need, this is what helps, this is what doesn't.
And that's so applicable at every level as well, isn't it? You know, looking at all those areas and the whole picture that makes up, you might have 5 minutes in that test, but it's the whole picture that makes up the difference. That means you can be your very best in that time and get the best out of your horse as well. You know, it's all the support for them as well. And them being the best.
You know, or even if it's just about enjoying it, you know, you might have someone that you come out and something goes wrong, but you're really pleased because you did X, Y, and Z, and they're like, oh, sorry about that. And you're like, actually, I'm really happy because I dealt with something else. But, you know, and they don't know, do they? Unless you say, when I come out, don't say anything, or do say something, or, you know, it's knowing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I do a lot, especially with parents and kids that are competing and things, is have an agreement as to when you're going to debrief or give them a chance to talk, because a lot of the time you come straight out of the arena, and in that moment you're emotional, whether it be good or bad or whatever.
Yeah.
You're in that. Don't ask them then. You know,
Yeah.
goodness me, you're either going to get
rubbish.
you're either going to get brat child, or this is adults too. To be fair,
the pony.
that's it. Yeah, well, that's it. I'm giving everything up. Or, oh my goodness, that was amazing. That was fantastic. And even then, you know, you still can't actually get that great analysis out of it, can you?
No.
Okay, so just really quickly to sum up then, I would like to know, along your journey, who has been your greatest inspiration and why? Oh, I knew she'd ask that.
I don't know. I have no idea. Lots of people. I can't pin one down. Probably the most influential moment was going out to Athens. And yeah, seeing it happen and seeing the British team win gold, seeing all the riders with different disabilities, what they can do. So many people throughout my journey, and for different reasons as well. I think I think you can take inspiration from everyone, not just performance wise. You know, seeing friends deal with challenges outside the sport and things like that, and how they retaliate, respond, deal with it, kind of puts trotting around in circles in perspective sometimes as well.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing from you, and hopefully loads of people are going to get loads of inspiration and top tips and thoughts from this as well.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Is there anything that you wanted to finish up or just say before we close this up for today?
No, I think we
covered it all.
Covered it all, really. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. If anyone ever wants to get a hold of you, ask you any questions or follow your journey, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm Erin Orford Para Dressage on Facebook, Orford Dressage on Instagram, and yeah, I've got my website, which is Erin Orford Dressage, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Super. Okay, well, thank you so much, Erin. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you and find out a little bit more about your journey, and we look forward to supporting you to future success, whatever that may be.
Thank you.